Thank you very much. Any more reactions from the audience?
Africa. I will try not to talk so much about sewage, which is kind of where my heart lies. I get involved in a lot of the crap of trying to figure out how to put in this infrastructure. But I actually went to a developers fair that was held at Burma Camp, and one of the bigger companies put together a developers fair. And we realized that developers and architects and these people, you only have 10% or 15% of the development of Accra. Everything else is informal. It's not the architects that are really to blame. It's basically everybody who says, I don't even want to employ an architect because it's too expensive. Let me go get the draftsman somewhere and put up something and let's see. And then we never count the cost, so we have very ugly structures that are uncompleted, and they are uncompleted for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. I feel that if we could just completed some of the stuff that we started, we would be in a better situation. So here's my solution to that. I propose what you call an eyesore tax. For as long as you have your building uncompleted, your tax rate is higher than the completed building. That would spur you to at least complete some phase of the building so that it would be beautiful. If you have iron rods sticking out and it's an eyesore, you are taxed at a higher rate. And that's my solution to that problem.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank Uncle Nat for, I'm one of the artists who took ground for the Accra City Tour during the International Art Program with the various African artists. And connecting that tour to this conversation, I believe there is a lot that we need to do, and we artists also have a say in this. And what we can do also is, when you put us together as artists, we bring out solutions quicker than when we are individuals sometimes. So in the case of where we also mentioned people taking advantage of the water bodies they have and creating life around it. Just as the market also, when we put, when you look at the market as a performative artwork, artists could come together, see the market women as an artwork, design something which can be a shade to them, and also create rooms upstairs whereby they wouldn't be using electricity or stuff like that, but there will be more ventilation. At the same time, it serves as a work of art, and they can also be around it. Instead of every day, we just go by, we are sacking them from there. The next day they come there, the place gets burnt, and the story remains the same. It has to do with history. When we go back to the history that you shared with us, connecting that to the present day, we can also do a lot, just as we keep mentioning from the UK, from the home course, etc. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.
I go to the University of Wisconsin at Madison in the United States. I am an educator. I study education and political science. And also I work for the United Way Ghana here. It's a nonprofit focused on education, health, and income generation. But right now, my mind is really, it's really got a lot of things going on. Firstly, I'm troubled at the fact that no one has seemed to brought up education or the youth. We're all sitting here, you know, majority of us are adults, and what I think is necessary is that we create an intergenerational discourse. This discourse that we're having right now is amongst people who are older, some of us in our, you know, in our 20s and things like that, but I think there should be a parallel summit with the youth. A little bit less intense, but we need to create the discourse amongst the youth, because that's the only way to build sustainability. So really, you know, that's all I gotta say.
That's a very Jose's favorite word, a disconnect somewhere. Here we are, the people who are running the system, whose minds were formed in the 1960s and 1970s, who used the abacus to calculate things, and the compass and all that. And we are creating a world for people like you who are already...
It is obvious that we are all concerned about the city, and we must find a way to express this concern in something positive. I talked about governance being one side and advocacy on one side. What we're doing here is a lot of advocacy and sharing a lot of intellectual thoughts. And I would pray for that day that that intellectual thought actually gets into reality. It's always been a problem. And we want to see a city where the mayor has, well, not the mayor alone, but the people in the city have ownership of direction. In other words, we want to decide that in 5 years' time, the whole of Accra should be Wi-Fi. We want to decide that, look, in 5 years' time, we should be able to cross from Kaswa to Dodo by rail. Okay? We want to see, what is it that we want to see? And what is it that we want to make Accra important for? Either culturally, educationally, or whatever. Unfortunately, 3 million or 4 million people who live in this city don't get the chance to make those decisions or contribute to those decisions. And that is why it gets to a point when the conflict just erupts. Because all of this is latent, all that we're doing here never gets into mainstream. So the point about whether a mayor should be elected or not is very relevant. The point about ownership, but you see, ownership is a relationship. I feel compelled and passionate about being a Ghanaian and being so patriotic when I believe that the systems that we've put in place are beneficial to me. And don't forget that when people rebel, it's called civil disobedience, and they rebel in different ways. Whether they litter the streets, whether they refuse to stop at traffic lights, whether they don't move water through their gutters, whatever they do, is some form of, disapproval of the system. So you've got to learn to bridge between governance and the governed. And that is when you can have a singular opinion on direction and ownership, and then we can move together as a city. So basically, for me, the big issue as having taken part in a lot of these advocacy issues is to bridge that gap, where everything that we put out there can be used.
As our gentleman here said, what do we do after here? We're all here saying this, we're saying that. The main thing is something we've all failed to realize is we don't have a maintenance culture. Britain has all they have from the 16th century because they have a maintenance culture. You can go to Britain today and see things they had long, long ago. Why? Because they've maintained it. But here, what we see, we, even the individuals, go around spoiling it, and you expect to see it 10 years later. No, you can't eat your cake and have it. So then in the end, instead of using our money to get new stuff, we have to go back and repair the old. And that's where we don't see ourselves going anywhere. And two, what I like to say is that, probably to the architects, I come from South Africa, and I come to Ghana. I get down from the airport, like I get off my plane, 5 minutes away, I see Airport City. Wow, nice place. But what does it look like? It looks like America. It looks like Britain. It looks like Milan. Why doesn't it look like Ghana? Why can I come to Ghana and say, wow, this building is like an American building? Because in America, when I go, that's all I see. But then I come to Ghana and I don't see anything Ghanaian. So then that is something we should be looking at. The young man said when Apple went to Amsterdam, they had to go back and forth with their plan because the country wouldn't accept what they want because it didn't fit with them. Why can't we do the same? Why can't you say, okay, come and build me a house? And the architect will say, okay, well, instead of using an old template from Coral Draw or something, I have this brilliant idea of something we put its symbols and all of that in. So I think that's something we should be looking at, that we could take by ourselves individually, instead of waiting for the government to come down and do all of that. Thank you.
And pollution and all that. I want to say that those are not problems. Those are symptoms. When we just focus on, when we're all talking about cleaning, and that is not a solution because that is not a problem. The problem we have is one of thought. It's thought. It's a leadership, it's an idea problem. And until we can solve our problem from the top, we can have the whole, bottom-up approach to this, vigilante, it's not going to work. if you look at systems that work, they were planned 1,000 years ago. Accra became the capital in 1877. There are cities that were planned 200, 300, 400 years before that. And the structures that were put in place are still effective because the thought was strong. We have to, and this is where I think we should challenge the leadership of this nation. It is not, for me, it is not enough to say somebody out there is responsible. If that somebody out there can't even take ownership of the thought of what the city is. The ancient Greeks would tell you when you were entering the temple of Apollo, there was a sign on the door. It said, "Man, know thyself." One of the strongest philosophical thoughts is, I think, therefore I am. If you can't think, you can't have an identity. The first most important platform to build anything on is strong thought. And I think that is why Accra is where it is. For example, when I say that the indigenous people of Accra are the Gans, and so I want to get a bit of their culture in the architecture and the structure. Let me take you on a journey. Let's imagine that when you get out of the plane and you raise your eyes right up into the skies, into the heavens, what you see is a building that looks like an anthill. Huge, magnificent, looks like an anthill. 1,000 stories. For me, that ties into the culture. These are the Bese people, the people of the anthills. That is what they are. I'm not saying we should, I'm tired of seeing Edinkra symbols and combs and it's too weak. It's too weak at all. I mean, how old are the pyramids? How old are the pyramids? The pyramid is an anthill. Thank you. But how old are they? We have to go back to thought. Another question I have is, what books do architectural students read? We are talking about intergenerational connectivity and interaction. I also want to see interprogram connectivity and action. I want to see architectural students read poetry. I want to see them read drama. I want to see them read other, I want them to read a bit of biology and physics. I want them to take interest in the arts. Because at the end of the day, when you sit down as a creative person to create, what is the source of your inspiration? What makes you tick? If all you read are textbooks, you are going to create what your professor created. Because that was his idea.
J-Man. Yes, sir.
I'm Kojoma Swasari. I'm a teacher. And I'm also involved in starting some small universities focusing on science and technology in Africa. I think that the problems start from the top, but the problems cannot be solved from the top. So we need multiple approaches. I think it is an absolute disgrace when the president of Ghana dies and we have to rely on the Chinese to build a grave. I think it's an absolute disgrace when, as recently, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs opened a headquarters built by the Chinese. Absolute disgrace when, likewise, Ministry of Foreign Affairs headquarters built by the Chinese. It's very sad. It's a complete lack of vision at the top. The question is, what can we do about it? I think what is happening in Egypt may happen here. Because as the young people get educated and more people get into the middle class or have aspirations for the middle class, they're going to fight back. It's absolutely ridiculous when MPs ask for raises in their salaries, when young people can't even get medication, basic medication. So what I'm proposing is that we have a day where we collect all the garbage and dump the garbage in Parliament House. Secondly, that's not enough. Those of us who are designers, we should team up. don't wait for the government to ask us to come up with a building. We should team up and try to convince people that we can do things differently. I honestly think that we have very, very serious and fundamental leadership failure. Thank you.
That's an grave of President Mills. You got it? Redesign his grave, and let's see what will come out of it. Are there some? Oh yes, Victoria.
Okay. Good evening. I just have but it's also sort of a question. I'm an urban planner. I'm not an architect. I'm an urban planner. But I think when I studied urban planning, the thing that made me really passionate about it was the idea of public participation. The idea of allowing people to have the opportunity to have a conduit through which they can communicate to government what they want their city to look like. And even sometimes when that doesn't exist, how do people come together and participate in shaping their urban space? For example, I'm really passionate about, someone's talking. Oh no. Like, I'm really passionate about urban parks. I'm really passionate about having safe spaces where children can play, people can come together, and even taking these parks that exist in Accra and like revitalizing them or getting people to use them. So rather than just, I think that the first level is sort of like what I think that we're doing here, which is we're getting people to talk about some of these issues. But I think what some people have sort of highlighted is what's the next step? Or how do we participate? How do we work together to sort of address these issues? So for example, I'm trying to work with people to promote parks. Working in Jamestown to sort of look at different spaces and try to look at how do we get people, how do we engage people, how do we get people to use these spaces? But I'd be really interested in hearing, like, if people are really interested in taking this on, like, how do we sort of continue this conversation forward? What are those next steps going to be?
Mention of the words science and technology. Was it Deacon? Right. And the lady said, oh, they're talking about science and technology in Africa. And the gentleman said, they don't fit in one sentence. They don't fit in one sentence. And they went off, I let them go, because I was just like, how am I going to deal with this situation? But I did know that I wanted to share this information with you. And it's very critical. What Nana Kofi is talking about, the anthills, I've been photographing them for the past maybe 10 years. So somewhere in my archives, you're going to find a few pictures of anthills. What we're failing to understand is that within those anthills are the constructs of fantastic architecture. And in Zimbabwe, we do have an award-winning architect, Zimbabwean architect, who built the first office block, which is naturally ventilated. Story, modern building, glass and coated. And it's based on the technology of ants. And that's where we fail to see ourselves as science and technology. So the technology actually exists here. And what we have to do is what Victoria and Francis Richards were saying, which is that what's the next stage? We have to move into those next stages. It can't be one person on the continent. I don't blame them for saying it doesn't fit in one sentence. That's purely our fault that is happening. I'm angry, but I don't blame them. Right? So, I don't know, I just wanted to drop that with you. I've done my bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obi. Thank you very much. I want to welcome my friend Frank. Frank is the professor.
Unfortunately, there are too many distractions simply by trying to survive in the city that is sometimes difficult to give thoughts to direction for the city. And like Konat also mentioned, we have a system that does not allow the inhabitants of the city to even partake in the direction of the city. How we move from here, I'm not too sure, but I guess with some amount of advocacy and with some amount of intellectual discourse, sufficient people will be in a position to be able to make an impact in how the city moves. Thank you.
The group here this evening is the fact that we all read, we can all write, we can all talk whenever necessary. And I think the more we voice out some of these thoughts and ideas, the better that our airwaves will also spread the ideas. We leave the talking to the serial callers And someone jokingly but seriously said in Ghana, those who talk don't know, and those who know don't talk. I think we are in a group who supposedly should know something and have some ideas. And I think the more we do the necessary advocacy, the more we even write. Believe me, there are people who will still read and wonder the direction we go in and question whether we couldn't do better. And I believe that if there's anything that we can say has come out of this evening, is the fact that we've discussed the challenges we have as a city, the lack of identity, the fact that we believe the city should be a better city than we all like to see it. And if we have discovered that even this evening, I believe it's the beginning of the first step that will lead to the next 1,000 miles.
Thank you. First, you have been very galvanizing. You lived up to my expectations. You have certainly held these elderly people to a respectable draw. So, just say your last few words, incendiary words, before we move away from you.
Thank you very much for coming and for the opportunity to talk about Accra. I love Accra, not so much architecture, but Accra. And what I said about what architecture students read, I liked your reaction, but I think your reaction was an excuse. And an excuse always disappoints me. I want you to read more than your professors taught you. That's the point I was making. I meet a lot of educated Ghanaians who don't read. When the last book they read was the last book they had to write a paper on. What I was trying to do is to inspire you to do better than your professors. And about these great ideas you were talking about, if you really have great ideas, how come I don't see them? Create a blog, create a website, get on Instagram, get on Twitter, get somewhere, show them. Nobody lights a candle and hides it under a bushel. If you have a good idea, show it. Otherwise, start reading, because that's where it starts. And also on the lady who talked about Edinkra, I love the Edinkra symbols. But to copy a design from 2,000 years ago and just paste it on a wall, for me is mediocrity. The designs are supposed to inspire you. When you think Edinkra, when you think Funde Funde, what does it create? How do you level it? What does it inspire in you as a creative person? You know, yes, our ancestors printed them on fabrics. But if all we will do is print them on walls, we haven't progressed. And that is the point I was making. I wasn't in any way belittling the traditions and the symbols. I think that we, if anybody, are challenged now. When I was in, I look like a young man compared to some of the members on the panel, but when I was in university, we didn't have internet. I graduated 13 years ago. We didn't have internet. You go to the library, and because there's only one book, somebody has moved it from the physics section and taken it to the literature section, so they can borrow it the next time they are at the library. Today you have the internet, you have Kindle, you can buy any book, anywhere, just by going on the internet. And I want to see young people tap into the resources. Now you have no excuse anymore. There was a long time in the world when you're an African, whether you were a painter, an architect, whatever, you were excused. You know, you go to an exhibition, they will show the work of the great, and they'll say, oh yeah, the Africans, they are also trying. But the truth is, they never ever thought we were good enough. They never thought we were as talented. And what I want to see is Africans who are significant and dominant all over the world, wherever you place them. When they say they are experts and they are professionals, they are not just professionals at Choco. They are professionals everywhere in the world. They know their game everywhere in the world. And that is why I am interested in young people. Don't come and tell me what your professors taught you. Tell me what you have done and learned after that. Thank you very much.
It's a little unfair that you cannot have the last word, but that's how the world is, okay?
Yes, my parting comments. Some years back, I worked as an urban planner for the Wake County government, and that's where Raleigh, North Carolina is. And one of the things I was tasked to do was to see how private road infrastructure would impact on public transportation policy into the future. And one of the things that informed the need for this to happen was that a lot of subdivisions, what we would call here housing estates, were busy troubling the local government about coming to clear up their streets, especially during winter storm. And one of the things the city kept telling a lot of the associations was that you are a private entity and you take care of your own private problems. But they wanted to look into the future about how they need to tackle this. And so I was asked to do a private road policy study for the county. So that would inform how, for example, private infrastructure can then be taken over by basically taken over by the public management and public purse. And I believe that that is going to be the issue that is going to strangle Accra in the future. The private development that is just going rampant around a lot of urban spaces, and the responsibility that will be required and needed to look after that. I do believe that there are too many housing estates, too many residential areas that are going to end up falling by the wayside in terms of them becoming unsustainable. And I do believe that, for me, I think that's the big issue. So as I mentioned earlier, beyond the fact or the issue of private infrastructure, I believe the issue then is to make sure that wherever you live, you make sure that you start to form yourselves into formal associations where you can take care of the stewardship and the issues, and the local government can hear what you need to attend to with their assistance, so that you make your life, the quality of your life, your urban life, worth living.
Great. I want to thank my panelists for a very passionate discussion. I want to thank you, the audience, for equally passionate disposition. It's quite obvious that this is a topic that engages a lot of people's minds, and everybody has had something to say. Sometimes the solutions comes out of some very strange areas. I'm reminded because I'm looking at my friend Renee. Renee has recently been developing school material, bags, etc., using garbage, found materials. And I mean, one would not imagine that the kind of stuff that Renee is using to make material for children to take to school can be done, but she's doing it. And I'm just giving Renee a plug. And I want you to know that some of these, sometimes the solutions to our problems come from very strange places. Thank you very much, Joe, for making this possible. Tuli, who is a major domo and who does all the logistics to make this kind of thing happen. There's a new young lady whose name I have not caught yet, but she is now the scientific, technological GUIs, this whole thing. This organization meets once a month at the last Thursday of the month. So the next, I don't know whether we shall be meeting in 3 weeks from now because we skipped last Thursday, but we'll let you know, okay? So thank you very much. You've been a good audience. Our lady from Hong Kong, thank you very much for your thoughts. The architects didn't quite appreciate what you said about them, but I can assure you that, as Sherry said, only about 15% of the buildings in this city are done by architects. The rest are kiosks done by local carpenters or draftsmen and masons, okay? So they are the ones you should be blaming, not us. As for the big, long words, since we cannot do big buildings, we use big words. It helps. Thank you and good night.